In 1994, two American automakers were trying to answer the same question with completely opposite answers. Cadillac launched the DeVille Concours with a 4.6-liter Northstar V8 mounted sideways across the front, sending 270 horsepower through the front wheels to a road-sensing suspension that adjusted its damping in milliseconds. It was the most technically ambitious American luxury sedan of its decade. The Lincoln Town Car answered with a steel ladder frame underneath, a 4.6-liter modular V8 mounted lengthwise driving a live rear axle, and a chassis that had been in continuous production since 1979. It was, by every measure that mattered to engineers in 1994, an old car. One company believed that American luxury required catching up to the Germans on technology. More horsepower, front-wheel drive, every electronic assist that BMW and Mercedes had introduced in the previous decade. The other believed that American luxury required not catching up to anyone, that a body-on-frame sedan with a soft ride and a soft V8 was a category that should be defended rather than abandoned. 3 decades later, with both cars available on the used market for less than the price of a new economy car, the question has a clearer answer than either philosophy could provide on its own. So, which answer was correct? The car that refused to change, or the car that changed everything? We start with the Lincoln Town Car. Before we continue, check the link in the description below to get your used car buying guide and avoid getting scammed or overpaying. In 1990, Lincoln redesigned the Town Car. In 1995, they did it again. In 2003, they did it a third time. 3 redesigns across 21 years, and every single one of them used the same architecture underneath. A perimeter steel ladder frame, a longitudinal V8 driving a solid rear axle, body-on-frame construction in an era when every other American luxury sedan had abandoned it. The Panther platform, introduced in 1979 for the Ford LTD, the Mercury Grand Marquis, and the Lincoln Town Car, ran continuously until 2011, when the last Crown Victoria rolled off the line in St. Thomas, Ontario. 32 years. By the end of its run, the Panther platform was older than most of its drivers. It was older than the regulations it had to meet. It was older than the buyers who walked into Lincoln showrooms looking for the kind of car their parents had bought, in the size their parents had bought it in, with the ride their parents had remembered. The Town Car did not survive 32 years because it was sophisticated. It survived because it was correct for what it was, and because the company that built it understood that there was a buyer who would never stop wanting exactly this, and exactly this only. To understand why the Panther platform refused to die, you have to go back to 1978, and the brief that started it all. The Panther platform was developed in the late 1970s under one of the most ambitious internal mandates in Ford's history. The car had to serve as the foundation for a full-size family sedan, a luxury sedan, a police interceptor, a taxi, and a limousine. 5 different buyers, 5 different price points, one shared architecture underneath. The engineering goal was durability above everything else, because 3 of those 5 buyers, police, taxi, limousine, would put the cars through service conditions that no luxury platform of the period was designed to tolerate. The architecture that answered the brief was deliberately conservative. A perimeter steel ladder frame, the same construction principle used in full-size American trucks. A longitudinal V8 driving the rear wheels through a 4-speed automatic. A solid rear axle on coil springs at launch, with rear air suspension added as standard equipment on the Lincoln in 1990. Independent front suspension with short and long control arms. Brakes that grew progressively larger as the platform aged. A frame and a drivetrain that could be repaired by any competent mechanic anywhere in North America, using parts that Ford committed to keeping in production for decades. The Lincoln Town Car version of the platform received the longest wheelbase, the most luxurious interior, the most sound deadening, and the most chrome. But underneath the differences, the town car shared its bones with the police cruiser that pulled it over and the taxi that competed with it for the airport pickup. This is the central engineering decision of the town car's existence, and it is the one that produced everything that followed. Shared parts, shared service knowledge, shared durability. A luxury car that could be maintained by a fleet shop because, mechanically, it was a fleet car wearing better upholstery. The second-generation town car arrived in 1990, designed under the direction of Jack Telnack, the Ford design vice president whose aerodynamic Taurus had transformed American sedan styling in the previous decade. The town car that emerged kept the formal notchback roofline and the long wheelbase that buyers expected, but lost the flat-sided fenders and angular character lines that had defined Lincoln since the 1960s. The drag coefficient dropped. The shape softened. The car looked, for the first time in its history, like it belonged in the decade it was being sold in. The 1995 mid-cycle refresh that this script is examining most closely was the moment the town car finally arrived at its mature form. The exterior received softer surfacing and updated lighting. The interior was redesigned around a new instrument panel with steering wheel mounted controls. The 4.6-liter modular V8 had replaced the older 5.0-liter pushrod engine for the 1991 model year, and by 1995, the dual exhaust version producing 210 horsepower had become standard. The 4-speed automatic transmission was updated to the 4R70W from the Lincoln Mark 8. The Panther platform underneath, by then 16 years into its production life, was unchanged. The town car's central engineering argument is that the right answer does not become wrong because it is old. A body-on-frame sedan is heavier than a unibody sedan. It is less rigid in torsion. It has more potential to flex over rough surfaces, which means more potential for body squeaks and rattles as the bushings age. It is, by every modern engineering standard, the inferior architecture for a passenger car. Every European luxury manufacturer abandoned it by the 1960s. Every Japanese luxury manufacturer never used it. By 1995, the town car was the only luxury sedan still in production anywhere in the world that used the architecture. What the architecture provided in return was specific and not replicable in a unibody design at the same cost. The body and the frame are separate structures. The body is bolted to the frame through a series of rubber isolators that absorb vibration before it reaches the cabin. The frame takes the structural loads. The body takes the appearance loads. Each can be optimized for its specific job without compromising the other. The result is a cabin that, when the rubber mounts are fresh, isolates the driver from the road in a way that no unibody sedan of comparable price can match. The town car does not feel like a tight car. It feels like a quiet one. These are different sensations, and they appeal to different buyers, and the town car's buyer wanted the second sensation specifically. The 4.6-liter modular V8 was developed by Ford in the late 1980s as a clean sheet replacement for the older pushrod small block V80S, single overhead cam, 2 valves per cylinder, aluminum heads on an iron block. It produced 210 horsepower in the dual exhaust town car application, modest by 1995 luxury standards. The DeVille Concours offered 70 more. The Mercedes E-Class offered more horsepower per liter. The BMW 740Y offered both. But the modular V8 was not designed to compete on horsepower. It was designed to last. The architecture of the engine reflects this priority at every decision point. A long stroke for low RPM torque. 2 valves per cylinder rather than 4 because 2 valves are simpler and more durable. A single camshaft per cylinder bank driven by a chain rather than a belt. An iron block instead of aluminum, which adds weight but adds durability under the heat cycles that a luxury sedan's engine experiences across 250,000 miles of stop-and-go driving. Coil-on-plug ignition. Sequential multi-port fuel injection. The systems are conservative. The architecture is conservative. The result is an engine that, in fleet service, regularly accumulates 300,000 miles on the original short block, on the original cylinder heads with no major internal work performed. The rear air suspension was the town car's one genuine technical complication, and it is the component that most defines the town car's ownership reality at age 30. The air springs replace the conventional steel coil springs at the rear axle, providing automatic load leveling and a softer ride. They are filled by a small electric compressor mounted in the engine bay, and the air pressure is managed by a height sensor that signals the compressor when the body sags. When the system works correctly, which it does for many years if the rubber bellows remain intact, the result is a ride quality that no coil-sprung sedan of the period can match. When the rubber bellows develop cracks, the system fails progressively. Air leaks out. The compressor runs continuously trying to maintain pressure. The car sits low at the rear. The compressor eventually burns out. The repair, for an owner who values the original ride quality, is replacement of the bellows and possibly the compressor, a job that any competent mechanic can perform, with parts available through any Ford dealer or aftermarket supplier. For an owner who has decided that the original ride is not worth maintaining, the alternative is a conversion kit that replaces the air springs with conventional coil springs, eliminating the system entirely at a cost of several $100s. The town car's owner community is roughly evenly split between these two responses, and both are defensible. The interior of the town car is the place where the car's intended buyer is most clearly visible. 6-passenger seating with a front bench seat available through the production run. Power adjustments for everything that could be adjusted. Wood trim that, by 1995, was no longer real wood on most trim levels, but a printed laminate that aged better than the genuine veneer it replaced. A JBL audio system on Cartier trim cars that remains, by the standards of period luxury, one of the better factory installations of its era. The instrument cluster used analog gauges through 1997 and a digital cluster on certain trim levels thereafter. Climate control that operated through dial and button interfaces that any driver could understand on first encounter. The town car's interior was not asking the driver to learn anything. It was asking the driver to be comfortable. The town car's commercial success across its production run is one of the most documented stories in modern American automotive history. The 1990 redesign won Motor Trend's Car of the Year and sold a record 147,000 units. At its mid-90s peak, Lincoln produced approximately 100,000 town cars per year. The car was the dominant chassis in the North American custom limousine market for the entirety of its production life. The most commonly used limousine and chauffeured vehicle in the United States and Canada, by a margin that no competing manufacturer ever closed. Fleet sales, to limousine services, executive car services, hotel transportation operations, funeral homes, accounted for a significant percentage of total production every year. The reasons for this fleet dominance are not aesthetic, they are economic. A limousine operator who buys a fleet of cars is calculating cost per mile over a service life that may exceed 300,000 miles. The car has to start every morning. It has to be repairable at any independent shop. Its parts have to be available through the standard automotive supply chain. Its drivetrain has to tolerate idle time, short trip operation, and the heat cycling that comes from carrying passengers through urban traffic for 10 hours a day. The town car answered all of these requirements better than any competing vehicle in its segment, and the limousine market voted accordingly for 20 straight years. The retail buyer who chose a town car in the 1990s was, statistically, an older buyer. Lincoln's own market research consistently identified the town car's primary buyer as a man in his 60s or 70s, retired or near retirement, who had previously owned several Lincolns and who valued the specific combination of size, comfort, and familiarity that the town car had been providing since the 1970s. This buyer was not interested in horsepower comparisons. He was not reading European luxury sedan road tests. He was buying the car his father had bought in the size his father had bought it, and he was willing to pay the price Lincoln was asking because the alternative, a smaller car, a quieter car, a more sophisticated car, did not provide what he was actually buying. The town car was a statement about continuity. The buyer was paying for the statement to remain true. The cultural prominence of the town car was sustained by its association with American institutional life. The car appeared in the background of countless films and television shows of the period as the default vehicle of the wealthy, the powerful, and the funeral-bound. It was the car that drove visiting dignitaries from the airport. It was the car that took the bride to the wedding. It was the car that took the body to the cemetery. Its presence in American visual culture was so consistent that the silhouette became a kind of shorthand, a way to communicate in a single shot the social status of the character occupying the back seat. This cultural status was not the same as desirability. Younger buyers in the 1990s did not aspire to own a town car. They aspired to own a BMW, a Mercedes, a Jaguar, perhaps a Cadillac CTS equivalent that did not yet exist. The town car was understood as a car for an older generation, and Lincoln did not significantly try to change this perception. The buyer the town car was built for continued to exist, continued to buy the car, and continued to recommend it to peers. The buyer demographic narrowed across the 90s and into the 2000s, but the buyer remained loyal enough to keep the production line running profitably for 2 more decades. The town car at age 30 is one of the most predictable used cars on the American market. Predictable in its strengths, predictable in its weaknesses, predictable in its costs. The drivetrain is the foundation of this predictability. The 4.6-liter modular V8 in the configurations used in the town car across its production run has been documented in fleet service to accumulate 300,000 miles and more on the original short block. The transmission, the 4R70W 4-speed automatic, is similarly durable, with routine fluid services keeping it functional well past 200,000 miles. The rear axle is a Ford 8.8-inch unit shared with the F-150, designed to absorb truck-level loads and effectively unbreakable in the loads a town car can produce. None of these components require specialist knowledge to service. Any general mechanic with experience on Ford products can maintain a town car correctly. The known weaknesses of the town car at age 30 are specific and well documented. The rear air suspension bellows develop leaks. The plastic intake manifold on certain modular V8 configurations can crack at the coolant crossover, producing a coolant leak that, if ignored, eventually leads to overheating. Window regulators wear out. The front blend door actuators in the climate control system develop the characteristic clicking sound that announces their imminent failure. The headlight lens material clouds over with ultraviolet exposure and requires periodic restoration. None of these is structural. All of them are repairable. The parts are available through any Ford supply chain, and the labor required is within reach of any general shop. The town car has no proprietary system that ages independently of use. There is no hydraulic mechanism whose seals degrade in storage. There is no aluminum block engine whose headbolt threads pull out of the casting under heat cycling. There is no electronic suspension whose adaptive dampers require dealer-level diagnostic equipment to service. Every component of the town car was designed to be repaired by a general mechanic using standard tools and standard parts, and every component continues to be repairable on those terms 30 years later. The result is an ownership cost profile that, for a car with a luxury badge and a quiet cabin, is closer to the cost profile of a Ford Crown Victoria than to the cost profile of any European luxury sedan of the same era. This is not an accident. The town car shared its underlying mechanical architecture with the Crown Victoria deliberately, and the cost advantage of that decision compounds across every year of ownership. The town car's value at age 30 reflects this reality. Clean examples in the 15 to 25,000 mile range, the cars that were stored, garage kept, driven sparingly by their original owners, sell for between $8,000 and $15,000 depending on trim and condition. Higher mileage examples in driver condition can be acquired for $3,000 to $5,000. Fleet examples that have completed 2 or 3 life cycles in limousine service are available for less than the cost of a comprehensive tune-up. The car is genuinely affordable to acquire and genuinely affordable to maintain. This is the town car's argument, and it is a more durable argument than the car's reputation for being old-fashioned has historically allowed it to make. That is the conservative answer to American luxury. A car that did not try to catch up to the Germans. A car that did not adopt front-wheel drive when front-wheel drive became fashionable. A car that did not abandon body-on-frame construction when the rest of the industry abandoned it. A car that bet instead on the architecture it already had, and on the buyer who had been satisfied with that architecture for decades and saw no reason to switch. The other answer was being developed in the same years, in Detroit, by a different American manufacturer who reached an opposite conclusion. Cadillac decided that American luxury needed to change, and built an engine, a chassis, and a brand identity around the proposition. The result was the most technically ambitious American luxury sedan of its decade, and the most consequentially flawed one. To understand the case for ambition, you have to go back to 1988, and the engine that was supposed to save Cadillac. In the late 1980s, Cadillac had a problem that nobody at General Motors was willing to name directly. The brand was losing. It was losing to BMW, which had spent the decade convincing American buyers that a smaller, sportier, more communicative sedan was the future of luxury. It was losing to Mercedes-Benz, which had established the W126 S-Class as the durability benchmark that every other luxury manufacturer was being measured against. And by 1990, it would begin losing to Lexus, whose LS400 had arrived at $35,000 and forced the entire industry to reconsider what a luxury sedan should cost. Cadillac's answer to all 3 threats was the Northstar, a 4.6-liter, all-aluminum, double overhead cam, 32-valve V8 engine mounted transversely, driving the front wheels through a transaxle, 270 horsepower at launch, a figure that placed the engine ahead of the Mercedes V8S and the BMW V8S in absolute output, and well ahead of anything else American luxury had produced in a generation. The engine was paired with a redesigned DeVille body, a road-sensing suspension that adjusted its damping characteristics in milliseconds, traction control, and a digital instrument cluster. The Cadillac DeVille Concours. It arrived for the 1994 model year as the technical statement of an American luxury brand that had decided it would no longer accept second-tier status in the global market. The press response was immediate and largely positive. Awards followed. Comparison tests reported that the car was, against expectations, competitive with the German sedans on objective measures. To understand why this technical achievement did not produce the recovery Cadillac was hoping for, you have to go back to the engine itself. The Northstar V8 was developed at Cadillac in the late 1980s as the cornerstone of a brand-wide repositioning effort. The decision to build an entirely new V8 was unusual for the period. Most manufacturers were extending the life of existing engine architectures through revisions and retuning. Cadillac's leadership concluded that the brand's competitive problem required a more visible solution, a new engine, with a new name that could be discussed in marketing materials and press releases, as evidence that Cadillac was no longer the conservative manufacturer it had been in the previous decade. The engineering team that received the brief produced an architecture that was, by any objective measure, ambitious. The block was cast in aluminum. The cylinder heads were aluminum. The 4 overhead camshafts were driven by chains. The valve train used 32 valves, 4 per cylinder, operated through hydraulic lash adjusters. The displacement was 4.6 liters, identical to the Ford modular V8 that Lincoln would use in the town car. But the architecture was entirely different. The Northstar was designed to compete on specific output and refinement. The Ford modular was designed to compete on durability and cost. The Northstar's launch specifications were impressive. At launch for the 1994 model year, the engine was offered exclusively in the DeVille Concours trim, producing 270 horsepower from 4.6 liters of displacement. The base sedan DeVille continued to use the older 4.9-liter pushrod V8 at 200 horsepower for 2 more model years. By 1996, all DeVilles received the Northstar, 275 horsepower in the base car, 300 horsepower in the Concours, a red line at 6,000 revolutions per minute, a 4-speed automatic transaxle, the 4T80E, purpose-designed to handle the engine's torque output through the front wheels, a drive-by-wire throttle on certain configurations, platinum-tipped spark plugs that Cadillac claimed would last 100,000 miles without service. The marketing materials at launch emphasized a feature that Cadillac called limp home mode. In the event of a complete coolant loss, the engine's electronic control unit would shut down 4 of the 8 cylinders, pumping air through them to cool the remaining 4, and would allow the driver to continue operating the vehicle at reduced power for as much as 50 miles. The system was real, it worked as advertised, and it served its intended purpose of preventing roadside breakdowns from coolant failures. It also, in retrospect, suggested that Cadillac's engineers were aware that the Northstar's cooling system was a potential vulnerability. A vulnerability that the limp home mode was designed to mitigate but not eliminate. The DeVille was redesigned for 1994, around the Northstar's installation requirements. The platform, designated K-body, was a stretched version of GM's front-drive luxury architecture, shared with the Cadillac Seville. The wheelbase grew to 113.8 inches. The transverse installation of the engine, combined with front-wheel drive, allowed the cabin to be packaged more efficiently than the rear-wheel drive town car could achieve on its longer wheelbase. The DeVille was, by interior measurement, larger inside than the town car was, despite being shorter outside. The press response at launch was strong. The DeVille Concours, with the high-output Northstar and the road-sensing suspension, was reported to accelerate from 0 to 100 kilometers per hour in approximately 7.5 seconds. For a 2-ton American luxury sedan in 1994, this was extraordinary. The town car, with its modular V8 and its conservative chassis, required over 9 seconds to cover the same distance. The performance gap was not theoretical. It was the gap between a car that could compete in highway passing situations with European sedans and a car that could not. The DeVille's engineering case rested on 3 pillars: the engine, the suspension, and the chassis layout. Each of them represented a deliberate departure from the conservative architecture the town car was defending. The Northstar V8's specific output was the engine's headline achievement: 270 horsepower from 4.6 liters at launch in the Concours, rising to 300 horsepower in the same trim by 1996, worked out to roughly 59 to 65 horsepower per liter, not in the range of contemporary European exotics, but considerably ahead of the Lincoln Modular V8's 46 horsepower per liter, and ahead of every other American V8 of the period at the same displacement. The engine achieved this output through the combination of double overhead camshafts, 4 valves per cylinder, and a relatively high compression ratio of 10.5 to 1. It required premium unleaded fuel, a requirement that the town car's modular V8 could avoid. The trade-off was inherent. More performance required more sophisticated combustion, which required higher octane, which raised the operating cost. The road-sensing suspension on the Concours was one of the earliest production implementations of electronically variable damping at this price point. The system used wheel position sensors and a control module to adjust the damping characteristics of each shock absorber approximately 1,000 times per second. In practice, the car could provide a soft ride on smooth surfaces and a controlled ride on rough surfaces, transitioning between the two states faster than the driver could perceive the transition. Cadillac's calibration prioritized comfort heavily. The suspension sport setting was, by European standards, a comfort setting, but the technology was genuinely advanced for the time and demonstrably provided ride quality that conventional shock absorbers could not match. The chassis layout, transverse engine, front-wheel drive, transaxle, was the most consequential of the DeVille's engineering choices, and the one that the town car community has criticized most consistently in the decades since. Front-wheel drive in a heavy luxury sedan produces specific handling characteristics that buyers accustomed to rear-wheel drive find disconcerting. Under hard acceleration, particularly on imperfect surfaces, the front tires manage both the propulsion and the steering simultaneously, which can produce torque steer, the tendency of the steering wheel to pull in one direction as power is applied. The DeVille's engineers addressed this through equal-length half shafts and chassis tuning, and the result was a car that managed its front-wheel drive better than most front-wheel drive sedans of its size. But the underlying architecture imposes limits that no calibration can fully eliminate. The 4T80E transaxle deserves specific mention because it represents the engineering decision that most distinguishes the DeVille from its rear-wheel drive competition. A transaxle integrates the transmission and the differential into a single assembly mounted directly to the engine. The output drives the front wheels through half shafts that pass through the transaxle case. The advantage is packaging. The entire drivetrain occupies the space ahead of the firewall, leaving the cabin and the rear of the car free of mechanical components. The disadvantage is service complexity. A repair to a transaxle requires removal of the transaxle from the engine, which in a Northstar-powered DeVille typically requires removal of the engine itself. Labor hours for service operations that are routine on the town car can be multiples higher on the DeVille. The interior of the DeVille was, in many respects, more modern than the town cars. The dashboard was less cluttered. The climate control system was more sophisticated. The audio system, in higher trim configurations, was equal to anything offered in the segment. Digital instrumentation was available. The steering wheel mounted controls were thoughtfully laid out. The leather and wood applications were genuinely high quality. The DeVille's interior, in 1994, looked 5 years ahead of the town car's interior. Whether this was an advantage or a liability depended on the buyer's age and aesthetic preferences. The town car's interior buyer preferred the familiar layout. The DeVille's interior buyer wanted something that looked more contemporary. Both responses were rational. The DeVille Concours and its Northstar V8 received the kind of automotive press response that Cadillac had not enjoyed in over a decade. Motor Trend, Car and Driver, Road and Track, Automobile Magazine, Popular Mechanics. Every major American automotive publication tested the car and reported that it was, against expectations, a genuine competitor to the European luxury sedans on objective performance measures. The Concours was placed in comparison tests against the Mercedes E-Class, the BMW 5 Series, and the Lexus LS 400. It did not always win, but it competed credibly, which for an American luxury sedan in 1994 was itself news. The awards reflected this critical consensus. The DeVille and the Northstar engine received recognition from Auto Week, Popular Science, Business Week, Automobile Magazine, Consumer's Digest, Robb Report, Popular Mechanics, and Rolling Stone. The engine specifically was treated as the technical achievement that Cadillac had built it to be. For approximately 3 years, from the 1993 launch through the 1996 model year, the Northstar was the most discussed American V8 in the automotive press. And the DeVille that carried it was the recipient of more positive coverage than any Cadillac sedan since the 1970s. The market response was less enthusiastic than the press response. Cadillac's overall sales continued to decline through the 1990s, despite the technical achievement the Northstar represented. The buyers who were defecting to BMW and Mercedes and Lexus did not return to Cadillac in the numbers that the new engine had been expected to generate. The reasons for this were partly demographic. The Cadillac brand identity was associated with an older buyer, and the buyers who would have valued the Northstar's performance were not the buyers who were walking into Cadillac dealerships, and partly perceptual. The Lexus LS 400 had established a new standard for what a luxury car should feel like, and the DeVille, for all its technical achievement, did not match that standard in the dimensions where the LS 400 excelled. The DeVille was a more powerful car. It was not a more refined car. The cultural position of the DeVille in the 1990s reflected this gap between critical and commercial response. The car appeared in automotive press coverage with regularity. It appeared in the cultural background of American life with less frequency than the town car did. The town car was the limousine. The DeVille was the retired executive's personal car. The town car was the airport pickup. The DeVille was the country club parking lot. The two cars served adjacent demographics in adjacent contexts, and the cultural prominence belonged consistently to the Lincoln. This is the DeVille's specific tragedy as a product. It was the better car by most engineering measures available in 1994. The press recognized this. The buyers who valued engineering measures continued to buy the German and Japanese alternatives. The buyers who walked into Cadillac dealerships continued to want what Cadillac had been providing for decades: comfort, size, familiarity, and a particular kind of American luxury identity that the Northstar engine, in retrospect, did not enhance and may have undermined. The DeVille at age 30 is a more complicated proposition than the town car at age 30, and the complication has a specific source. The Northstar V8's headbolt design is the defining maintenance reality of the DeVille's third decade. The engineering decision that created the problem was made early in the engine's development, and it operated as intended for the engine's expected service life. The decision was to use steel headbolts, threaded directly into the aluminum block with a fine M11 by 1.5 millimeter thread. Steel against aluminum is a difficult interface to manage. Steel expands at a different rate than aluminum under heat. Aluminum threads are softer than steel threads. Across thousands of heat cycles, every cold start, every drive cycle, every shutdown, the steel bolts work against the aluminum threads they are seated in. The aluminum threads, being the softer material, lose integrity progressively. Eventually, the threads strip out of the block. When this happens, the consequences are specific and well documented. The headbolt loses clamping force. The cylinder head pulls slightly away from the block at the affected bolt location. The head gasket loses its seal at that location. Combustion gases push into the coolant passage. Coolant pushes into the cylinder. The cooling system loses fluid progressively. The engine begins to overheat. In advanced cases, the coolant contamination produces the milkshake-like brown emulsion under the oil filler cap that has become the diagnostic signature of the failure. The failure typically appears between 50,000 and 100,000 miles in the affected production years, 1993 through 1999, the years when the original headbolt specification was in use without revision. Cadillac revised the headbolt design for the 2000 model year, lengthening the bolts to improve thread engagement and revised it again in 2004 to a coarser M11 by 2 mm thread. The 2000 revision reduced the failure rate. The 2004 revision reduced it further but did not eliminate it. Reports of headbolt failures on 2004 and later engines exist in the documentation. The engine that the DeVille used through 1999, the years this comparison most closely examines, used the original headbolt specification and exhibited the failure most consistently. The correct repair is a thread insert procedure using a specialized toolkit, most commonly the TimeSert system, which GM officially recommended through service bulletins. The procedure replaces the failed aluminum threads with steel inserts of the correct size and depth, providing a permanent repair when performed correctly. The labor required is substantial. The engine must typically be removed from the vehicle. The cylinder heads must be removed. The block must be reconditioned at each affected bolt location. The heads must be reinstalled with new gaskets, new bolts, and the correct torque sequence. At a specialist shop, the comprehensive repair costs in the range of $4,000 to $7,000 in parts and labor. At a Cadillac dealer, the cost can exceed $8,000. At a general shop unfamiliar with the procedure, the cost can vary significantly, and the quality of the repair can vary with it. This is the DeVille's hydraulic roof problem. It is a specific, well-documented, ownership-defining maintenance reality that the brand's reputation does not prepare buyers for. The Northstar V8 was, in 1994, a remarkable engine that produced power and refinement at a level that no previous Cadillac V8 had matched. The Northstar V8 at age 30 is an engine whose owner has either already spent $4,000 to $7,000 on a thread repair, or is statistically likely to spend that amount in the near future, or is driving an example whose maintenance history is unknown and whose headbolt condition cannot be assessed without disassembly. The rest of the DeVille's mechanical reality is more conventional. The 4T80E transaxle is generally durable when serviced on schedule. The front suspension components, bushings, ball joints, tie rods, wear at rates comparable to other front-wheel drive luxury sedans of the period. The road-sensing suspension's electronic dampers can fail with age, and replacement is expensive. The electrical systems are more complex than the town cars, and produce more intermittent failures with age. None of these is catastrophic in isolation. Cumulatively, they produce an ownership cost profile that runs measurably higher than the town cars across every year of comparable ownership. A clean, low-mileage DeVille concours from the mid-1990s, the kind of car that was garage-stored by an original owner and has covered fewer than 50,000 miles, sells today for between $5,000 and $9,000. A driver condition example with 100,000 miles and a documented headbolt repair sells for slightly less. A driver condition example with 100,000 miles and no documented headbolt repair sells for considerably less because the buyer is acquiring not just the car, but the statistical likelihood of the repair in the near future. The market has priced the Northstar's reputation accurately. The discount is the cost of the maintenance reality. The question this comparison forces is not which car was better in 1995. The DeVille was the technically superior car in 1995. It had more horsepower, more sophisticated suspension, more modern packaging, and more credible competitive standing against the European sedans that both cars were ostensibly competing with. The automotive press of the period recognized this, and the awards reflected it. The question is, which philosophy proved correct over the 3 decades that followed? And the answer is more divided than either community of owners will typically acknowledge. The town car's philosophy was that American luxury did not need to catch up to anyone. The Panther platform was an answer to a specific question: what does an older American buyer want from a luxury sedan? And the answer was honest, durable, and economically defensible. Lincoln did not pretend the town car was competing with BMW. Lincoln built the car for the buyer who had no interest in competing with BMW, and the buyer responded by keeping the town car in production for 32 years. The DeVille's philosophy was that American luxury required engineering ambition to remain culturally relevant. The Northstar was the most visible expression of that ambition, and the DeVille was the car that introduced the engine to the buyer Cadillac most needed to retain. The engineering achievement was real. The Northstar was a genuinely advanced V8 by the standards of 1994, and the DeVille around it was a genuinely modern luxury sedan. The press response was earned. The awards were earned. Where the two philosophies diverge most clearly is in the ownership reality at age 30. The town car at 30 is an old car that is doing exactly what it was designed to do. Its weaknesses are known, its repairs are conventional, its parts are available, and its cost of ownership is consistent with what the buyer was promised when the car was new. The DeVille at 30 is a more complicated proposition. Its weaknesses are also known, but one of them, the headbolt failure, is more consequential than any individual weakness in the town car. The repair is expensive. The labor is specialized. The statistical likelihood of the failure across the affected production years is high enough that any honest assessment of DeVille ownership has to include the headbolt rebuild in the projected cost. The market has priced this difference accurately. The town car's used values at age 30 are stable, predictable, and well supported by the car's reputation for serviceability. The DeVille's used values are lower, more variable, and more sensitive to specific maintenance history. A clean town car at $8,000 is more car for the money than a clean DeVille at $6,000 because the long-term cost of keeping the town car operating is significantly lower. This is not a judgment about which car was better engineered. It is an observation about how the engineering decisions made in 1994 have aged across 3 decades of real-world ownership. The town car's defenders argue that the Panther platform's longevity is itself the verdict. A platform that remained in continuous production for 32 years, that supported 5 different vehicles in 3 different market segments, that became the default police, taxi, and limousine vehicle in North America, is a platform whose engineering decisions were proven by the duration of the validation. The town car was not the best luxury sedan of its era. It was the most useful one across the longest service life, and usefulness across long service life is itself a form of excellence that more sophisticated cars have rarely matched. The DeVille's defenders argue that the comparison is unfair because the Northstar's headbolt issue should not erase the engineering ambition that produced everything else the engine and the car represented. The Northstar made power that no contemporary town car engine could match. The road-sensing suspension provided ride quality that the town car's air springs could not match. The packaging delivered an interior that, despite the DeVille's shorter exterior length, was as spacious as the town cars. These are real achievements, and they are not negated by the headbolt failure, even though they are complicated by it. Both arguments have merit. The town car was the more honest car. The DeVille was the more ambitious car. The town car bet on conservation and won the bet. The DeVille bet on innovation and lost the bet in a specific way that 20 more years of refinement could not fully recover from. This is the dimension of the comparison that neither community of owners typically acknowledges. Honesty and ambition are different virtues. They produce different cars, different ownership experiences, and different verdicts at age 30. The buyer who wanted an honest car got the town car and got exactly what they were promised. The buyer who wanted an ambitious car got the DeVille and got more than they were promised on the days the engine was running correctly, and less than they were promised on the days the headbolts began to fail. Neither buyer was wrong. Neither car was a mistake. The comparison exists not to declare a winner, but to make both choices visible: what each car offered, what each car cost, and what each car continues to ask of the owner who chooses it 3 decades after both cars left the showroom. 2 American luxury sedans from the same decade, both 4.6-liter V8 powered. Both aimed at buyers who wanted a large, quiet, comfortable car with an American badge. Opposite answers to the same question about what American luxury should be. The town car answered with conservation, the same architecture Ford had been refining since 1979, in the same body-on-frame configuration, with the same rear-wheel drive that American luxury had always meant. A car that did not try to compete with the Germans because Lincoln understood that its buyer was not asking for that competition. The DeVille answered with ambition. A new engine, a new platform, a new suspension philosophy. A car that did try to compete with the Germans, and that succeeded on the technical measures the press could verify, and that introduced a maintenance reality the press did not foresee. 30 years later, both cars are available on the used market for less than the cost of a single year's depreciation on a new luxury sedan. The town car is the safer purchase. The DeVille is the more interesting one. Both descriptions are true. Both choices are legitimate. The buyer who chooses each is choosing a different definition of what an American luxury sedan was supposed to be. Before you go, check the link in the description to grab your used car buying guide and avoid getting scammed or overpaying. Trust me, this will help you a lot. Now, click on this next video if you want to see what happened when Japan and Germany answered the same question that Lincoln and Cadillac were arguing about, and built two of the most over-engineered luxury sedans of the 20th century. The Lexus LS 400 versus the Mercedes-Benz W124 E-Class, a billion-dollar Japanese assault on the German standard, and the German response that refused to acknowledge the fight had even started. It is right there on your screen.